Welcome to a screencast on the properties of liquids. The objectives of this screencast are to distinguish between adhesive and cohesive forces, to define viscosity, surface tension, and capillary rise, and to describe the roles of intermolecular attractive forces on each of these properties or phenomena. And let's start by looking at the intermolecular forces experienced by a liquid, and specifically, let's look at drops of water on a spider web. Now, within a water droplet, there are attractive forces between water molecules. These attractive forces makes the water bead up and form droplets, and these are known as cohesive forces, which are intermolecular forces between identical molecules. So cohesive forces here are attractions from one water molecule to another identical water molecule. Now, at the interface between a strand of spiderweb and a water droplet, there are attractive forces that make the water droplet cling to the spiderweb. These are called adhesive forces, which are intermolecular forces between different molecules. So these adhesive forces are between molecules on the spider web and molecules of water. Now, let's look at some properties of liquids in terms of these kinds of forces. And one property of a liquid is what's called its viscosity. And viscosity is a measure of the liquid's resistance to flow. So we have some substances, for example, like gasoline, that flow relatively easily and have what we call a low viscosity. Now, the reason gasoline flows relatively easily and has a low viscosity is because it has weaker intermolecular forces and smaller molecules on average. When the attractions between molecules are not very strong and the molecules are relatively small, they can flow past each other relatively easily. Now, other substances, like for example motor oil, don't flow as easily and have what's called a high viscosity. And high viscosity liquids have stronger intermolecular forces and often have larger molecules. And these factors hinder the ability of these molecules to move past each other, and this results in a slower flowing liquid. Now, viscosity can be measured. It's measured in units of pressure versus time, and this table shows the viscosities of some common substances given in millipascal seconds. So, for example, octane, a component of gasoline, has a fairly low viscosity, 0.508 millipascal seconds, and flows pretty easily, whereas motor oil has a viscosity between 50 and 500 millipascal seconds, much higher, and motor oil has a wide range of viscosity values depending upon the purpose for which it's needed, the type of engine, the operating conditions, weather, etc. Now, another characteristic of a liquid is its surface tension. And surface tension is the energy needed to increase the surface area of a liquid, or the force needed to increase the length of a liquid's surface. So how much energy is needed to basically make this substance, this liquid, spread out or stretch. Now, if we look at the inside of a liquid compared to the surface of a liquid, so here in a water droplet, inside the liquid you have a water molecule that's attracted equally in all directions by water molecules surrounding it. But at the surface of the liquid, you have water molecules at the surface attracted inward and to the sides, but not attracted outward. So we have an unbalanced force, an unbalanced cohesive force between molecules at the surface of the liquid, and the effect of this is that it causes the surface of the liquid to behave kind of like it has a stretched rubber membrane. And substances that have relatively strong intermolecular forces, such as water, these cohesive forces allow insects to walk on water. So this sort of stretchy rubber membrane effect allows an insect leg to not go through the surface of the water. It makes spherical water droplets. And here's a couple pictures of that, in fact. This one shows both effects, spider walking on the surface of the water and a water droplet forming. It can also have some interesting effects because water sticks together pretty well. So you get this interesting looking layering effect, thin layer of water flowing over a swimmer. And this is not water, this is mercury. And mercury also has strong attractions between its atoms. And in fact, it actually has a much higher surface tension than water and also beads up. Now, surface tension can be measured as well. Surface tension is measured in units of force per length. And surface tensions of a few common substances are given here in millinewtons per meter. And you'll note that water and mercury have fairly high surface tension. In fact, mercury has a really high surface tension. And so they will readily coalesce and form droplets, whereas things like ethanol and octane, which have lower surface tension, do not bead up and form droplets as readily. Now, liquids can also undergo something called capillary action. And this occurs when a liquid flows within a porous material due to the attraction of the liquid molecules both to the surface of the material and to other liquid molecules. So here's an example where we have wine wicking up a paper towel because of both strong attractions of the water and ethanol molecules in the wine to the OH groups on the cellulose fibers in the paper towel. And then, of course, also the strong attraction of water molecules to other water and ethanol molecules. So they attract to the paper and are kind of drawn up it, but then they draw other molecules of water and ethanol with them. Now, this capillary action is also how towels absorb water. Capillary action occurring in cells that are known as xylem in plants are part of the reason how plants bring water and dissolved nutrients from the soil up through the roots and into the plant itself. And you can actually see this pretty readily if you place a piece of celery in colored water, water colored with food coloring. You can actually see the color transported up into the celery leaves. And there's some other useful examples of this. For example, if you want to collect a small amount of blood, for example, if you need to test someone's blood for the amount of glucose in it, and this is maybe somebody who might have diabetes, you can prick the finger, get a little drop of blood on the pricked finger, and then that can be drawn up into a narrow diameter glass tube by capillary action. And adhesive forces between the molecules in the blood and those on the surface of the glass inside the tube draw blood up the tube, and this continues until the weight of the blood exerts a downward force equal to the upward force due to capillary action. And this is actually also an analytical chemistry technique called thin layer chromatography that uses capillary action to separate small quantities of mixtures based on differing attractions between maybe a piece of paper, chromatography paper that liquid wicks up, and you might have maybe different dyes in ink that separate and travel up the paper more quickly or less quickly based upon relative strengths of intermolecular attractions between the molecules of ink and the liquid and the piece of chromatography paper. Now, depending upon the relative strengths of the adhesive and cohesive forces, a liquid can actually rise in a capillary tube like it does in water, but it can also go down in a capillary tube, fall in a glass capillary tube like it does with mercury. This is going to depend upon the relative strengths of the intermolecular forces, and how much the liquid rises or falls depends directly on the liquid surface tension. It's directly proportional to the surface tension of the liquid, and it's inversely proportional to the density of the liquid and also to the radius of a tube. So smaller tube will have the liquid drawn farther up in it. Larger diameter tube, the liquid will not be drawn as far into it. And that is it for the Properties of Liquids screencast.